All right, we got it. There we go. So first item, first off, I'm Kevin Geiger. I'm with Two Rivers, for those of you who don't know me. And Stephen, you want to just introduce yourself, and then we'll actually go around it.
Yeah. Hi all. Been bugging you with emails, but officially I'm Stephen. I've been at Two Rivers probably about 4 or 5 months. So excited to get started on this bylaw process.
Great. Now I'll call on you just because it's hard to sometimes for people to how to go next in this, and then just unmute and say your name and the town you're with and your role in the town, because we'll somewhat be working together, and then of course we'll be working town by town by town. So I'll just go in the order your squares appear on my screen. So Don, are you there? Don Graham?
I am here, and my camera is not working.
That's okay. Who you with, Don? I know.
Stratford Planning Commission.
Okay, great. Lori. Oh, you're on mute, Lori.
Lori Hirschfield, I'm with the Town of Hartford. I'm the Planning and Development Director.
Great. And Matt.
Hi, I'm Matt Osborne. I'm a planner for the Town of Hartford.
And Therese. Oh,
I'm town manager for the town of Bethel, and I'm on the planning commission, and I'm
great.
the zoning administrator.
Oh,
Wow.
you're it.
Mhm.
Gregory.
I'm an architect and I'm on the Stratford.
Okay. Oh, good. We haven't met. Sandy.
I'm Sandy Haas. I'm on the Rochester Planning Commission, vice chair, and I feel it important to point out that we have no paid staff.
Yes. Sunny.
Yeah, Sonny Holt, Randolph, Vermont Planning Commission.
Trevor.
Oh, I'm Trevor Lashua. I'm the town manager in Randolph.
Thanks. Bruce.
From the Town of Hartford. I'm on the Planning Commission.
Wonderful. Nick.
I'm on the Thetford Select Board, and the issue matters a lot, and I'm here more as a fly on the wall. But we have some planning commission folks here.
Good. Martha.
Martha Walks, Stratford Planning Commission and DRB.
Josh.
Hey, Town of Randolph, Director of Economic Development and the Zoning Administrator.
Very good. Sally.
Sally Miller, I'm the chairman of the Woodstock Planning Commission, and I'm also on the EDC Housing Working Group.
Great. And Rick.
Rick Benson, Bethel Planning Commission and DRB.
Good, good. DC.
Good morning. David Forbes, Chair of the Thetford Planning Commission.
And Neil.
Morning. Neil Leitner, Town Planner and ZA for Woodstock.
Wonderful. And Peter.
Good morning. Peter Gregory, Two Rivers Adequachi.
Good. All right, good. Well, first off, I'm very glad we have every town here, because we're all going to deal with this project as a group, and we're going to deal with it singly as well, as we kind of do a custom fit, as I call it, for each town there. I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to run through the kind of budget, which also lists the tasks a little bit first. And so share screen. So let's see. Are you seeing the budget?
Yes.
Oh, good. I don't know why I'm not seeing the budget, but if you're seeing the budget, that's what matters. So this is the task for those of you who have dealt with municipal planning grant funds before from the state. There's not a lot of amending extensions or stuff. You kind of, what goes in is what you end up doing. We can do additional stuff potentially as the money allows, but you kind of have to hit all the pieces that you laid out in the proposal. So this is the beginning. This is the joint kickoff meeting. There will be, and I'll talk about all these steps in detail later. There's the public informational meetings. Those are 2 of those, and those are meant to be consortium wide. Then there's a desk review of each bylaw, which I'll talk about, some mapping changes to districts. We don't envision a lot of mapping changes to districts, but that's a possibility. Then comes the custom work with each town as we go through planning commission meetings. And we have a little money in there for renderings if we need a picture or 2. The idea we have the Keys to the Valley, which is our regional housing project. The idea is that this project will live on that website because it's housing related, and that'll give us a handy spot to have some stuff so that if people out there want to be like, what is this project and where's it at? They can go and there can be a web presence at that. The way this project is structured is that we don't go the usual route with planning commission hearings, send it to the select board hearings, zoning adoption. This project is predicated on the idea that we're using the interim adoption process. We go direct to select board hearing, skip several weeks of process in doing that. And that's why there's no planning commission hearing in there. There's just a select board public forum. That gets you ready for a hearing. Then there's the last little tweaks. Then we get ready. We have a meeting set up to just kind of have everybody go through how we're going to run a hearing. And then we actually do the hearings and then get off to the races. So that's the budget in there. And the rough hours, things may move around. The agency doesn't really care as long as all the pieces get done, and you can't get any more money than the amount of money that you have out there. That's total $66,000 all in all. We have a $6,000 match in there. So there's $60,000 coming from the state, $6,000 from Two Rivers. If we get you to adopt the things interimly, then we don't have to pay the $6,000, which is nice. So that's the budget. And any questions on that before I run back over to the tasks? And then we're going to talk about that a little more. And I can't see you all, but I'm not seeing any questions. And Stephen, if you see anything, just pipe up.
I don't see any hands or anything in the chat so far.
Okay. I'll go back to the beginning. So I'm going to focus mainly on the early parts of the project, just so that we can kind of keep our brains in order here. The timeline, the basic timeline on this is that we would do these public information meetings early. Those are setting the groundwork. And then we would be on to the desk review and the beginnings of the planning commission or select board meetings as we work out the drafts. Given that some select boards may change in the next month and a half here, we figured, well, let's do the public informational meetings after we get any different new select board members so they can fully come on board with everybody else. So we're probably thinking late March or early April, and relatively back to back on those public informational meetings so that people can hopefully see both, and there won't be a lot of time in between for them to forget one or the other. The idea is that we're going to kind of move the heart and then the mind between these two. And this is to, we will do some pretty wide outreach. We'll work with you all on outreach to get folks out there so that they fully understand what this project is and why we're doing it. And the first part's really going to be the why, is like, what is housing? What is the housing issue? Why are we working on housing? Why is it important, to Josh from an economic development point of view, in Randolph or Sally on the EDC or anybody there, so that it's not just a feel-good item. It's actually really important for lots and lots of reasons. So that's the intent of the first public meeting, is to kind of talk about the issue and create the why. And then the second is to talk about things that probably we're all relatively conversant with, but that the public is not necessarily, which is just the technical concepts. So if we're going to talk about a district, well, what's a district? If we're going to talk about a conditional use standard, well, what's a conditional use process? When we talk about types of housing, what do we mean when we say short-term rental or multifamily? Just so that if somebody's going to follow along with the process, they kind of get a little primer on all those terms. So I find, and it's hard to me being in the field to remember that people just don't do this all the time. That's why I find I was just literally on a call before this meeting with a person kind of explaining a couple of those steps. Because he thought you could just like go get, if it doesn't work, you just go get a variance. And I'm like, no, that's not how variances work. One of the things though we'd like, especially from you all today, is on those public information meetings, and you don't have to give it to us right now, but if you can send Stephen by email some ways that you think that really work well for outreach in your communities. And if it's something we can do or something better that you can do. So for example, if there's a listserv locally, if it's putting up a flyer at the library, if it's sending a note home with the school kids, whatever you think would be a good method in your particular community to get word of this project out, because we all don't want to be, near the end and have somebody go, I never heard of this. What are you doing? You guys have been hiding under a rock type thing. We will have those people regardless of what we do. But we need to be able to say, well, we did do a good process. So does everybody, I don't know why I can't.
So could I ask a question on that last item?
Yeah.
A specific deadline by when you're looking for that information?
I would say by the middle of March, for sure.
Okay.
So, 3 weeks or so from now.
Okay.
It would be good, because if we're going to hold meetings later in March or early in April, we'll want, 3 weeks or so of ads out there.
Would it also be helpful if we identify those type of things, because a lot of that we can actually help do that outreach? So
Yes.
Would it be helpful for us to identify that?
Yes, and so you can feel free. In fact, it's even better for us if you say, oh, the best way is our listserv, so just send it to me and I'll put it on the listserv.
Okay.
Yeah, that type of thing. If there's a community bulletin, I don't know of, I know a couple towns kind of have like a mini little newsletter that they send around. But we just want to get things out, and we can't kind of do the typical, sandwich board out in front of the town hall because there won't be a physical place. I suppose you could do a sandwich board that says it's going to be a Zoom meeting. Check out the town website, and we will have a little blurb on the Keys to the Valley site so that you can send somebody to that link. But that's the idea around those two meetings, is to first kind of get everybody on the same page, hopefully generate some interest in the project and some support, and maybe pop a few myths around affordable housing, just because a lot of people, when they think affordable housing, they think of a certain image. So we'll dispel a few of those, and they think of housing that is only for a certain income level. And we're not really talking about that. We're talking more about housing that is affordable, more than standard affordable housing. And then that second meeting kind of talking about things that we all deal with. What's a DRB? All that type of stuff.
Kevin,
Yes.
if I could interrupt you just for a moment.
Yes, DC.
One of the issues that's come up with the interactions between our housing committee here in Thetford and the Planning Commission is, as mundane as it sounds, the terminology we're using around this. And I'm finding, as you just pointed out, that using terms like affordable and workforce tends to lead people in the wrong direction. I think you were alluding to that as well. the term we've begun to use is missing middle housing.
Yep.
And I think using that term will incite less of a reaction on the part of our general constituencies. I'm not trying to be, persnickety about this, but I do think it serves a useful purpose to, there's a semantic differential, but it's more than just semantics. I think it points to the large gap we currently have between what you might call, luxury housing and less, I don't know what to call it, frankly, low income housing or what have you. So that's just my 2 cents on that. But we're going to be using the missing middle housing term going forward.
Okay, great. Yeah, missing middle housing is certainly a good term to kind of talk about. Well, this is housing that's not using all the federal money and going through all those type of things, and it's not luxury stuff. It's in the middle. It is a term that is somewhat attributed to a certain spatial construct. So single family homes aren't missing middle housing typically, the way that's used. Neither are duplexes. It's really townhomes, quadplexes, the things that are multifamily in the middle between an apartment building and a house. If you kind of go to the missing middle website, that type of thing, you'll see that. However, we can use the term however we want. The attainable housing is another term that's used out in the field. I always think that sounds a little blah, like, oh, this is attainable, versus, aspirational, a little bit better. Workforce housing has been used a long time in the Upper Valley, around some housing issues there. I tend to just use housing that is affordable, or housing for the rest of us, or housing for me. And you can use that. You can pretty much everybody here in this call, I imagine, is like, basically we're talking about my house. We're talking about housing that planners and professionals, and plow drivers and teachers and all sorts of people get in. And that's the thing in the storytelling part of this, which is the non-technical part at all. The who is it for? What we find in public policy nowadays, especially, is if we can put the project on a person versus on some theory out there and go, this is for our plow drivers. This is for our teachers. This is for the engineer that the local firm couldn't hire last week.
If I could just add a little bit on that, Kevin, I think we've always struggled with that for many years, and I agree with you. My tendency seems to be focusing, like you were saying, it's the diversity in housing options, and I think that's where why we have our push points is that we don't have the diversity. We don't have the diversity in terms of the size, the style, the affordability, where it's located, whether it's cluster or single family or multifamily. We're missing the whole boat. We just, it's either it's you get this and you get a little bit of that, but maybe nothing else. Right. So for me, at least from my perspective, that it really is us looking at that diversity every time we're looking at housing. Are we meeting multiple housing needs, or are we just focusing on one particular? Because frankly, I think you need that mixture. And not just focus on any one particular type of housing.
Yeah.
So.
No, thank you. And so in that first public informational meeting, we're going to show pictures of literal housing types, and especially in our communities. So we go, this is the thing we're talking about. And there's no better way to plant a picture in somebody's mind than to show them a picture and go, that's actually a house that we're talking about. That's house there happens to be affordable housing and a standard affordable housing. That house next to it is the same house we're talking about, but that's not a standard affordable house. And for the bigger towns, the biggest break point for our project, I think, is going to be between Woodstock, Hartford, Randolph, Bethel, where we have more sewer and water issues. Rochester, we've got those on a slightly less scale. Stratford, Thetford really don't have those nearly as much. where the typical Twin Pines affordable housing project, 20 units, 30 units in a chunk is not really going to happen. And I think that's one of the things we want to convey to people, because if they're just thinking about, oh, that new project, behind the Kilton in West Lebanon or whatever, that we're not always talking about that type, right? Exactly, Lori. It's not always that a building. It may be an apartment in your garage. We want people to think of the whole gamut out there. And so then while we're doing the public informational meetings, internally at Two Rivers, we can be doing the desk review, which is we look at each of your bylaws. And again, we're focusing on the bylaws, not plans or anything, and running them through, to me, a little process where we're going to look at these 4 items. We're going to look at the districts. I don't envision a lot of changes on districts, but specifically the districts where you want more houses. So if you have a rural conservation district or whatever, we're probably not going to look at that at all. The uses, what uses are in your list, what uses could be added to your list, and where are they in your lists out there. The processes, and especially one of the things I want to do is kind of work to try to make you one step easier in the process. So if you're, first off, if you aren't allowed at all, can we make you allowed? Then if you're conditional, can we make you only site plan? If you're site plan, can we make you only permitted? If you're permitted, maybe we can make you no permit at all. And in particular there, I'm thinking about some specific things like maybe in-house ADUs. Do we need a permit? Because if you don't have a permit, you can't have an appeal. And appeals are the things that can really slow people down. And then the standards, what are the parking standards? What are the lot use standards or whatever? We'll do that in-house, basically mark up each of your bylaws. And that will give us the universe of changes that we're going to look at. And so that's an easy way for us to kind of go, okay, I got a 50-page bylaw in front of me. I'm only looking at this, 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 and this. And as some of you may have heard when we started this project, when we get said and done, for most of you, it'll be like 100 words. The amount of physical change to your bylaw is going to be pretty small, I think. But it's going to be important. It's going to be another use, a different standard, moving that from one chart to the other chart. And then what we'll do is then we'll come out with you all and go through these, work with you. This to me is the next particular part where I really want your thoughts. Is the project talks about planning commission meetings, and that's our traditional role. We work with the planning commissions, we draft bylaws, then we go to the select board. Since the select board will be so involved and it will go direct to their hearing, I want to make sure that the select board is happy, and that dynamic is particular to each of your communities. And so it could be joint select board planning commission meetings. It could be in your town that you really say, oh, we're going to get, we have a lead select board person and a lead planning commission person. Why don't you just work with those two? You can, maybe the select board says, planning commission, you got it. Just do it. When you're happy, let us know and we'll run with it. Each town probably has a different dynamic. And I don't expect you to know that right off the top of your head. But again, as we get ready to begin that process, which I don't envision happening until probably until May, maybe early June. I would like it to start before the summer begins, because sometimes in the summer, everything just peters out. But I'd like some feedback to Stephen on each of your towns as to how you see that going. I do, I heard some people say that zoning administrators, another great person to be involved, or DRBs to go, well, this is we've been using this particular part and it just hasn't worked very well. And so bring those into your process as much as you want. And again, those, like in Hartford, Lori may say, well, we got to go talk to Joanne, because she's been dealing with those permits, and Teresa's a one-stop shop over there. So Teresa just has to talk to Teresa. And each of you will have an idea on that. But is everybody good on that? And that we're not just talking the usual planning commission meeting, get set, go to select board, have some more meetings. This is the drafting process. And it can include anybody that you want to include in there.
So if I could just, Kevin, ask a question or just.
Yeah.
So there's an interface that we're having with our update of our town master plan on housing. And I don't know if other communities are doing any overlap like that. Are there any other communities doing that?
Woodstock is that a little bit, yeah. But I know.
Okay. All right. Well, then it may not play out as much, because that's one of the things that we thought about, is that there is an interplay with our own planning grant that we got. So we'll just have to work that through. And, you know, I anticipate that we're going to have more than those 3 meetings to deal with the issue of housing, but we can have meetings that are focused specific on that interplay with the bylaws as well. So, I mean, for us, it's a lot of workshops, you know that.
Yeah,
and a steering committee. So we'll be. So.
Yeah, and Rochester, Thetford, I believe, has a planning grant to do a capital budget, and so that may be taking up some of the planning commission's brain there. Rochester did not get funded, but maybe they will get funded with additional funding to do a zoning update in general. So there may be some work happening on that. So again, yes, you may have a plan update or a zoning update or some type of thing that's around the project, and just make sure we're aware of it, and then we'll try to work on that. Your zoning, we can only make changes in your zoning that your plan supports. And so that is one thing we will do as we do the desk review, is we'll run over to your plan and make sure that we're not running afoul of your plan. That's where district changes. Again, your zoning district map does not have to look exactly like your future land use map in your plan, but you can't, in my view at least, you can't make a new district that does not exist in your plan at all. But if your boundary's here and you got to move it to here, I never have heartburn over that. I don't see us creating a new district anywhere, but I could see that you go, oh, like I know in some work in Bradford, we just, you know, we went up a block, that type of thing. Move things around a little bit. And in general, all your plan needs to have is some rough language that says, you know, the planning commission should revisit the bylaw and make changes as needed. Some wide open foundational step that gives us enough to go on. But if your plan is very specific and says, you know, that district shall be 1 acre lots, and we want to go, well, let's get rid of the minimum lot size, then we may have an issue, and we'll note those things. But we're going to try. This is not a plan update and bylaw update grant, so we're going to try to avoid any of those things out there. Again, any questions on that particular stuff, and do be thinking about how you want to handle who's all in the room once we get underway with your particular drafts. And we don't have any real care one way or the other, as long as they're happy at the end.
Kevin?
Yes.
So, yeah, Sonny Holt here. As far as the communication goes, I imagine there'll be a lot of emails and different drafts you'll be sending out. But in these particular meetings here, they'll all be by Zoom primarily.
The idea on the planning commission meeting, or the actual drafting meetings, I'm hoping that those are going to be in person. There may be some stuff, but by then, you know, we're hopefully summer, and the original public informational meetings are set up to be virtual though, which is easier to get done widely. But at the planning commission meetings, I think maybe if we can, we'll be in person. And again, if a town's preference is like, hey, we just want to do it virtual, well, we can do that too. I find it's a little faster to be able to do it in person.
Kevin, two things, if I may.
Yeah.
One is here in Thetford, we're looking at a neighborhood residential zoning district. Just to give you a heads up about that. The other question is pertaining to the desk review.
Yeah.
Would it help you if we were to kind of bullet point some of the issues that we're looking at, for example, maximum allowed density or maximum building heights or, minimum lot size, that kind of thing?
Sure. If any of you have given thought to that stuff already, and want to send Stephen a note and say, in your desk review, really look at these things. These are the things that have jumped out to us. That's wonderful. Yeah. We have a kind of standard checklist of things we're going to go through, and if you, DC there, were you thinking of a new district?
That's correct. It's already in some town documents and mapped out. I can send you a copy of that.
But would your plan support that? Would there be a?
Insofar as I'm aware, yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, that'll be the biggest hard part, is if we ever get a thing where we go, we can hardly do this unless the plan gets changed over there.
No, I see no need to do that. And we've actually put some supporting text into the town documents around that idea.
Okay.
And we will be sending you, thank you for the answer. We will be sending you, we're going to be discussing that tonight in our meeting.
Wonderful.
Some points of emphasis as far as changing some housing guidelines. We'll go ahead and do that.
And Stephen's the point on that, so send everything to Stephen. One thing that Stephen and I talked about, which this meeting kind of created a little bit, is it may be nice for us to have a point of contact in the town, and to go, yeah, we'll send it to everybody in the world, but if in particular, if we want to go Rochester, what's up with them? Is Sandy a good person? And so if you all want to think about, okay, we want Stephen to definitely touch this person in town. Bethel is easy because Teresa's the one I'll hit there. But Sandy, if that's you in Rochester, or whoever in a particular town, whether it's Neil or Sally in Woodstock, I'll let Stephen know and kind of go, this is the one person or two people maybe who are kind of our liaisons to the project in general. And that way, should we have something where we need to reach out to a town, we can make sure we're dealing with the right person.
Yeah, Kevin, if I could just respond to DC's comment, I thought it was that's another thing that we've definitely been thinking about, is just, if we're looking at holding these informational meetings late March, that gives at least all the planning commissions a couple, at least a couple meetings. So if they just put this kind of as an agenda item to be thinking about, if you can send a list along with kind of the ideal how we get this out to the public, but also just kind of a things to watch for, kind of notify me of things that the Planning Commission has been talking about regarding housing, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, and landmines too. We work with all of you and we try to stay aware of it. But if there is, if we were working in Newbury and talking about correctional facilities out in the hinterlands, we'd want to know about that because that's a hot button right now in Newbury. And so if somebody just built this thing and the neighbors are wild about it or whatever, or perceptions that are in town, the people perceive there's nowhere left to build, or whatever, and maybe we're not going to obviously solve the price of plywood and some other things out there, but that's always good to know. We try to have a pretty good sense of messes we're going to walk into before we walk into them, but you could let us know too. And as the project goes along, of course, if you hear something about it. We're going to try to have a pretty good public presence of the project, so that the public's aware, you know, that there'll be articles in the newspaper every now and then, that type of stuff. So this thing is pretty clear and present as we go along, and that way when we get to the end and the select board's doing their hearing process, hopefully maybe everybody won't agree, but they won't be surprised by anything. And that's the early stuff, and you know, and then we'll talk again, because later we'll be on to the next step, but that won't be until into the fall. We have 3 meetings per town in the budget. Yeah, some towns may take 2 and some towns may take 4, and that's okay. But if everybody had 4, then we blow through things. So we'll adjust that as needed. Those meetings, again, if we can, we'll try to be in person, but maybe it'll be a mix here and there. And it may not end up being with your actual planning commission, depending upon how you choose. You may say, well, it's going to be this little mini group that we're forming, because some of you already have housing groups and they may want to be involved and run with it. Is Stratford have a housing group, Don or Martha? Yes. I know Woodstock's got a group that's working on it.
It does not.
No.
Okay. Yeah. And Nick, I know, has worked on, and Lee have worked on some things in Thetford. So there's a kind of a housing group there, maybe. Yep.
Yeah, we have a housing committee. Chair is Sarah Martell, and she's actually sitting in on planning commission meetings, and I'm sitting in on housing committee meetings. So we're trying to develop a kind of a hybridized relationship, if you will.
Okay, that's good. Thanks for bringing that up, DC, because we have, in general, we have all the planning commission, town managers, select board emails and stuff like that. If there are ad hoc people on housing groups, we probably don't have them. So if there's anybody you want us to be adding to our emails, like Sarah Martell there, let Stephen know the name and the person and why we're adding them, and then we can put them on the list. Sandy, I know you guys are working on zoning potentially up there. Do you have a housing group in Rochester?
So Council on Rural Development did one of their, listening things, and I seem to be the coordinator of the housing task force. So we're trying to pull together all of the pieces, all of the efforts in that regard. One of the things that came out of that I found interesting, because I think our zoning is actually pretty good on this, is the concept of trying to make the existing, how do we make existing houses affordable? Mm-hmm. And that's not something for your group, but that's something we're going to be working on locally.
Oh, how do you make existing houses affordable for?
Well, for instance, convincing somebody not to hang out for the $400,000 out-of-state purchaser.
Oh, yeah.
So if I could just clarify a little bit with you, so you're talking about existing homes. Are you thinking of it from the concept of maybe ADUs as well as one of the mechanisms for that? Because I'd be interested a little bit more about that conversation.
Well, so there are a number of things going on. One of the big issues that our board is looking at right now is that we've had a number of inquiries in the last year from people who want to put a second residence on an existing property. And with Kevin's guidance, as we read our zoning, that's not allowed. So that is one piece that we're going to be looking. We are in fact we are trying right now to amend the zoning to come in conformance with our recently revised plan. And so there are a lot of things on the table, but everybody is very interested in housing. And the second structure piece, we had quite a debate about a few months ago, and I said yes, and I lost. The rest of the board thought that we had to require subdivision. We are now revisiting that, and people are starting to at least listen to me on that. But that's a big thing, because that's one of the ways that you get, you build for your children, and you have, and actually I think we'll improve. Anyway, long conversation.
Yeah, no, if on that front, this would be the kind of thing that I think would be good for all of us to have a further discussion with you. So Kevin, if you're thinking about, how we all bring ourselves together and
Yeah.
share ideas,
Yes.
that's the kind of thing that would be really interesting for us to explore all together, because I have some thoughts about it, you have some thoughts about it, and we put our brains together and we may come up with new concepts or ways of approaching it that could be applicable across the board. So that, Sandy, thank you for sharing that, and I look forward to hearing more.
So the other piece that we're looking, I just sold a property, and I wanted to sell it to somebody local, and I lowered the price to make that happen. It is, I'm not saying that I took a bath, but I could have held out for somebody from New Jersey, and I chose not to do that. And it's a bias of mine, and I think my boards as well, that at least in the Rochester Village, we would like our residences to have full-time people in them and not be vacation homes. So that's a policy thing that I want to do on a kind of informal basis of convincing my neighbors that that's who they want to sell to. We also have some properties that are basically, like they're tied up in an estate or something like that. So we have available housing that is sitting empty. And, so we're going to be trying to mobilize how we can make that happen, get those used.
Yeah, that's the thing. One of the things that's going to come up is there's a lot of stuff that's applicable to this that's not zoning.
ADUs is like it, yeah.
And whether it's a financing program, like Woodstock basically is a program that they've used where they buy down the price of a house by putting their own money in. The money stays attached to the house. They get it back out eventually, but they do that. And Warren has a project in Montpelier where they put public money into sharing the cost of an ADU, and they get some kind of price controls on the ADU back out. So there's stuff like that can get done. I think we'll just put those, on a list over here in the parking lot as we go through, just to remind people that it's not always, zoning can only do so much. As we know, we have 7 towns without zoning in our region, and it's not like housing just being built willy-nilly and cheap in those towns. So there's the proof that it's not always zoning that's in the way. And that'll be important too for the lay audience, because sometimes they'll be like, well, is that inside zoning or not in zoning? You go, well, that's not zoning. But Lori, your comment and Sandy's comment makes me think that there may be a point, especially as we start drafting or something, where we want like a little bit of a round robin, and maybe bring somebody back together. And so if you all think that that's good, we may do that. We didn't plan on doing that, but that may be useful to kind of just have a round table of thoughts about, oh, this is coming up in our town. And
Right. No, I think that's great. And I mean, ADUs, there's nothing it's state statute. There's many different mechanisms. There's been some programs around that and a lot of different stuff. I mean, I see that as our way of immediately getting housing out there, even before we're done with this process, is that the concept of ADUs and getting that out there as a tool for increasing housing. And I know this is focused on the bylaws, but I think part of that is there is some flexibility that each municipality has in how they implement ADUs, and having more flexibility within the state statute is fine. And I think that might be worth us really talking about at those different levels, because that's something that you could be working on today, and within 6 months you can have housing starting to pop up. But there's also so that's short-term, mid-term, and long-term options. So just thinking that, and maybe we just start the conversation here, because I could see the bylaws for us is not necessarily everything getting captured under this municipal planning grant, but it's planting the seed for us to be continuing to work on other things outside of the bylaw initiative.
Yeah, and there may be parts as we get into each of your bylaws where there's easy things to do, medium things to do, and some things that like, we're just not ready for, and we can shelve those, and that's where the custom part with each of you will come in. other thoughts here. I was just looking through. Okay. Yeah, you know, we have a little over a year to do the project. So I imagine a lot of the guts of the project will really happen in the fall. That typically is a decent planning time for folks. And any questions kind of on what we're gonna do, how we're gonna do it? Just want to make sure everybody's kind of familiar again with the intent here before we get going too far. Okay. Either you're all still not had enough coffee, or you just like this thing so much you're raring to go. We're raring to go. Speaking of raring to go, the legislature, of course, is in the mix, and they may do something that at least gives us new avenues as we go along. But we'll see what the legislature comes up with. We know they're tinkering with rentals, potentially short-term, potentially just kind of some state minimum mandates, a lot of Act 250 stuff, you name it. But
Kevin, this is Teresa. I have a question about when do you think, or do your estimate and your timeline about when we will be finalizing these interim bylaws? Just Rick Benson and I are on the Planning Commission. Rick's also on the DRB, and we've had some recent DRB applications, and people are looking to see some of the changes that we want to make happen sooner rather than later. So are you thinking that we would be adopting these rules around this time next year or sooner?
I don't know, Stephen. I think you could be this time next year. I think you could be in the fall potentially, if you wanted to, because we're using interim bylaw procedures. It's always possible that you do some and then more. And you go, oh, that's an easy one, you know, set front setbacks and waiver provisions for front setbacks in villages, which several towns have done by interim procedure. And you,
Okay,
just,
Bethel's lucky. Yeah, we're lucky too. We had already recently updated. We'd gone through, met with the DRB and worked, and the zoning administrator, the assistant zoning administrator, worked through some of the things that we needed to address, you know, so we recently have gone through that process already of a review of our district. So, and PC is working on some other stuff to kind of dovetail with this. So that's good to know. So fall or somewhere between the late fall and early spring. So
yeah, and
thank you.
And frankly, we're hoping you all have slightly different ideas of timing, because then we won't be doing 7 things at once. Hopefully some will sugar off a little earlier and some in the middle and some a little later. Stephen, any comments on timing? And
yeah, I mean, the most annoying answer I always give is it depends. So depending on what, and just as a reminder, often when you do these type of things where you open up, okay, we're going to look at the housing. Well, the legislature passed something, and now we want to look at the energy, and you know how our bylaws might affect that, and then you start to tell. So there's a lot of things that can sway this. But I'm setting a goal by this time next year, definitely having this chunk of the housing to be done with. That said, that doesn't mean that won't open other doors and avenues that each town will want to look at after we're done. But I definitely put that as a solid goal, that all 7 are done with this housing section by then.
Kevin, can you take down the documents so we can see each other?
oh yeah, yes. Yeah, I forget that can't happen because I can see you all in the document there. There you go. And Tom Skull has joined, I see. Tom, you just want to say who you are and where you're from?
Yeah, I'm from Stratford. I'm just listening in. I've actually been on the call since almost the beginning. So
okay.
Just listening. I'm on the Planning Commission in Stratford.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, good. All righty, folks. Let's see. We've got a few minutes left. If we want to, any particular things on your mind related to this project?
Kevin, one quick thing pertaining to the interim zoning bylaw issue. Is there any plan to address that in the educational portion of this process? And I say that perhaps out of oppression and concern, there may be some blowback around it.
Okay, just for folks who go, what is interim bylaw? Why are you using that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and if I could just jump in there a little bit, I agree. Do you see that? Because we do have, and I've expressed this before, we do have some questions and concerns about using that mechanism, because you start setting a precedent of, is this urgent in terms of, you can't go through the additional 3 months of the process that is required by statute. And are we going to get pressured to do that for many other things? And then we're overstepping that process. So we've only used that once in my tenure here in 25 years. And that had to do with sexually oriented businesses because of some pressing issues with the court case. And the sensitivity of the placement of that in relationship to, child care centers and that kind of stuff. So I am also in that boat of trying to understand a little bit more about how we go through that justification with the public, with the select board, with the planning commission, so I think we have to not necessarily assume that that's going to be an easy path or an appropriate one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I will second that. In Woodstock, we actually had a petition that bypassed the planning commission, which is quite controversial right now. And I'm very concerned about not really tying this directly into the planning commission. Whether we need to go through hearings or not is one thing, but somehow I believe that they should be going hand in hand.
Okay. Good. And our intent right now is to work with the planning commission, because that's the usual process, but just not go through the hearing process for time and money and other reasons, speed. But if your town says, oh, well, we really want to go that route, there's no budget for that. But, if you want to, okay, off you go. And, when you get ready, the select board will come back to us or something. We can be doing.
Would that not be one of our 3 meetings?
You mean what, a planning commission? Let's say we're only going to have 2 meetings drafting and have a planning commission hearing or something. Yeah. That could work out. Yeah. Basically, we have a certain amount of time and manpower we can put towards this, and that may be in your particular town, that may work. Okay. All righty, folks. Well, sure we all have things to do. Thank you all for coming. Stephen, you've noted everybody who's here somehow, or done some way to do that. Oh, and right, we have the recording.
Could I, Stephen, could I ask that there be a list that shows not just the names of the people, but who they are? Because I tried to take notes on who was from what town and what position, and I got lost.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Kevin, can we have a link to a recording of this meeting?
Yes. Stephen has those powers.
Oh, all right, Stephen. Sorry, I didn't mean to bypass you.
No.
Yeah,
and basically, if it's a technical item, I'm probably not the guy.
Okay, well then, Stephen, the man with the headphones. Yeah, if you could just send a link to this, just so I can review it and digest anything I may have missed the first time around.
Great. Yeah, I will send that out along with the names and where you're from.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And so again, if you have ways in which you think we should be doing outreach in your community, or in which you will do outreach in your community, get those to Stephen. If there are people who are not the usual suspects that we should be adding to our email list, get those names and emails to Stephen. And those are the 2 biggies coming up. Okay, wonderful. Thank you all.